He didn't scream. He didn't leave. He just said, I forgive you. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't love him anymore. This isn't a story about betrayal. It's a story about what happens when forgiveness kills the love that was left. I told him the truth on a Thursday, not because the guilt was unbearable and not because I couldn't take the silence anymore. It wasn't noble. It wasn't even kind. I told him because I wanted something to shift. I didn't know what exactly, just something. We'd been living side by side like a well rehearsed routine, sharing space, sharing meals, sharing the kind of conversations that fill air but never touch ground. And underneath it all, I was carrying something sharp and quiet, something I wanted him to notice, even though I hid it well. It had happened 2 months before, a business trip that wasn't really business, a dinner with a vendor that turned into drinks, which turned into laughter that wasn't forced, which turned into a cab ride where I didn't say no. And maybe it sounds ridiculous, but I didn't plan to do it. I didn't even want it until I did. And by then, it had already started, and stopping would have felt like lying too. The man's name was Colin. He was older, confident, the kind of man who looked at me like I was still someone new, someone with secrets worth uncovering. He asked questions my husband hadn't asked in years about music, about books, about the kind of life I would have lived if I hadn't settled so early. And I answered, even though I knew those answers didn't belong to this version of me. We didn't fall into bed like in the movies. It was slower. Like we both knew it didn't mean anything, and somehow that made it feel safer. But I remembered every breath, every pause, every moment where I felt both alive and deeply, irreversibly wrong. When I came home, I kissed my husband on the cheek, told him I was tired. He made me tea, rubbed my feet while we watched the show I barely registered. I smiled, laughed at the right jokes, said I love you when we went to bed. And for 2 months, I pretended everything was the same until it wasn't. That Thursday, I was standing at the sink, rinsing coffee mugs. He was folding laundry behind me, humming something under his breath. It was raining, not dramatically, just steady, gray, unremarkable. But something about the sound made the silence between us feel louder. And I said, I need to tell you something. He didn't speak at first, just turned off the music and sat down on the edge of the couch. His hands still held the half folded towel, like he didn't know what to do with them anymore. I didn't dramatize it, didn't cry, didn't beg. I just said the words like they were a report I had to file. I kissed someone, slept with him, once, on that trip. He stared at the floor, as if trying to find the thread of the moment before, when he still didn't know. Then he looked up and asked, Why are you telling me now? I didn't have a real answer, because I don't want to lie to you anymore. He nodded slowly, set the towel aside. Then he stood and walked to the kitchen. I heard the kettle go on, and he asked, Do you want tea? I thought I misheard him. Tea? That was his reaction? He took down 2 mugs, the one that said, World's okayest husband, and the one I used every morning that was chipped along the rim. He poured mine first. Then he handed it to me and said, I forgive you. Just like that. No shouting, no questions, no, who was he? No, how could you? And in that moment, something in me, something I didn't even know was holding on, just collapsed. I thought I wanted peace, redemption, but what I felt was absence. A cold, clean, hollow mercy that didn't scald, didn't sting, didn't even leave a mark. He forgave me with such grace it broke something in me. Because I didn't want grace. I wanted fire. I wanted proof that it mattered. I wanted to see that what I'd done had shaken him, had hurt him, had cracked the foundation of what we were. Instead, he was kind, and it felt like he wasn't there at all. We didn't talk about it the next day or the one after. He made me breakfast like he always did: eggs over medium, sourdough toast, coffee with oat milk. He kissed the top of my head while I scrolled through my phone, told me to drive safe when I left for work. And the silence wasn't cold, it was warm. It was unbearable. 3 weeks later, we were having dinner with his parents. His mom made lasagna and talked about her garden, about the neighbor's dog, about the same stories she always told, the ones that never changed, no matter how much we did. He was next to me, refilling my wine glass without asking, resting his hand on my thigh like he always had. He laughed at his dad's dry jokes, leaned toward me when he said, "We should take them out next month. Maybe that Greek place you liked." When his mom asked how we were doing, he smiled, looked at me, squeezed my hand, and said, "Never better." And I almost believed him. But something twisted in my stomach. Not guilt. I was already used to guilt. This was grief for something I didn't even have a name for. Maybe it was the version of me that used to love him, or the version of us before silence turned into performance. That night, when we got home, he brushed his teeth and left the bathroom door open like he always did. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. He walked past me and kissed the top of my head and said, "You've been quiet today." "I'm just tired," I said. It was true, but not in the way he thought. I watched him fall asleep, watched his shoulders rise and fall under the comforter we picked out together years ago. He looked peaceful, solid, like someone who believed love was enough to hold anything together. And I realized then that I didn't love him anymore, not because I stopped caring, but because he made it too easy to stop. Because when I confessed the worst thing I'd ever done to him, he didn't flinch. He didn't fall apart. He just stayed, like nothing could touch him. Like even betrayal didn't register as something worth bleeding over. And it made me feel like a ghost in my own life. I didn't want him to yell. I didn't want him to leave. But I wanted to see him break a little. I wanted to see that I could reach him, that my mistake had mattered enough to ripple through him. Instead, he became more loving, more patient, more gentle. He brought me flowers on random Tuesdays, booked a weekend trip for us to reconnect, tried harder, held tighter, looked at me like I was still the woman he chose. And I hated it. Because every kind gesture was a reminder of what I'd ruined and how he refused to admit it was ruined. He never asked why, never once brought up the other man, never wanted to know what I felt in that moment or after, never wondered what drove me to stray. Maybe he was afraid of the answers, or maybe he didn't want to hear them because it would mean confronting the quiet truth that I had changed, and he hadn't noticed until it was too late. I started pulling away in small ways. I worked later than I needed to, took long walks in the evening, joined a book club I didn't care about. I needed air, space, a sliver of something that didn't remind me of what we were pretending to be. He noticed, but he didn't question it. He just gave me room. And that only made it worse, because now he was becoming the perfect husband to a woman who was no longer there. So I left. 3 months after my confession, I woke up before sunrise, packed a suitcase, left a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't dramatic, just a folded page with 8 lines of careful handwriting. "I'm sorry. I tried. You didn't do anything wrong. But I can't live inside this quiet anymore. I don't know what I want, but I know it isn't this. Please don't hate me. I just need to go. Take care of yourself. You deserve more than my confusion." He didn't call, didn't chase me, didn't text. He just let me go, the same way he forgave me. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd screamed. For a long time, I told myself I left because I was broken, because I didn't deserve him, because I had done the unthinkable and couldn't stomach the goodness he gave me in return. But now, looking back, I think I left because he made it possible, because he built a cage out of kindness and I couldn't breathe in it anymore. because he should have said, "No, this broke something in me." But he didn't. He said, "It's okay. I love you." And maybe that's the problem. Maybe love shouldn't always be unconditional, because sometimes we need someone to hold up a mirror and say, "What you did, that wasn't love." I think I wanted him to save me. And when he didn't, when he just accepted me as I was, I realized I'd have to save myself, even if that meant walking away from the only person who ever truly stayed, even if it meant hurting him again, this time by being honest enough to leave.